The Super Bowl is over. The 2023 season is over. The 2024 offseason is officially here. What to expect now and what is next for those Super Bowl participants? How do the 49ers get back to the Super Bowl next year? And how do the Chiefs retool to stay in their dynasty run that they're in the midst of? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at PD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love the everydayers. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to play with. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Matt, here we go. It's the 2024 offseason, and we're already seeing some minor moves happening as teams start to prepare for this thing and get ready for the combine, get ready for the start of the new league year.
Yeah, and so I love how the NFL kind of has different seasons, like as soon as there's coach hiring season, there's draft season, there's free agent season, there's a slight window where there's actually an off season where people, take their kids on vacation and get out of the building for a little, and then training camp season and mini camp season and, the regular season and all that stuff. But right now is sort of a transition period. I think some of us have that Super Bowl hangover. Where do we go next in our NFL life? But this week in particular, and you just started to see a couple little things, you're going to see a lot of cap casualties. I mean, that's what's going to happen this week. Like my Steelers were the first ones. They cut 3 guys, Mitch Trubisky, Chuks Okorafor, their punter. Yeah, but that's going to be a regular occurrence. And why I'm bringing that up is obviously it's to get more cap friendly, cap compliant. Like for the Steelers' sake, those 3 cuts didn't get them under the cap yet, but it got them close, and they don't have to be yet. And the key here is the comp game and what you're doing to the players this week. So by signing let me start here. Those players that gets cut this week, they can sign. Okay, Chuks Okorafor, he got cut yesterday. He could sign with the Bears tomorrow. He doesn't have to wait for free agency to open. He doesn't apply to the free agency rules. So in a way, you're spreading some goodwill amongst your building. It didn't work out with us. Our cap situation's not great for you, but we want to get you on the market as soon as possible for your own good. It's a little more attractive now to sign one of those guys than wait for free agency to hit. And then the other benefit of signing one of those guys is it doesn't hurt your comp equation, your comp pick equation. So if you sign one of these cut guys, that doesn't factor in at all. So if you're planning on having a big spending spree and you still want to try to get comp picks out of it, it doesn't hurt you. So it's good for the players. You can kind of get ahead of things. I mean, if it's a foregone conclusion, start cutting dudes. And frankly, you can start signing dudes this week if you want.
Okorafor is an interesting one because he's a starting offensive tackle, which has value in the NFL. But there was something going on where he got benched and didn't want to be back as well. So this was kind of like, you don't want to be here. We benched you anyway. So we're going to send you on your way now and get under the cap.
So, I know people don't want to spend an hour talking about Chuks Okorafor, but I mean, he's just a good example of along these lines. I personally thought the Steelers would hold on to him until after the draft, kind of like they did with Kevin Dotson, trade him for a 5th or 6th round pick because he's only like a $6 or $7 million cap hit, and he's a borderline starting right tackle. That's great. You can maybe got a pick out of a player like that, or you just say, I want the fluidity of having that $7 million now, and so I can make other big moves. And plus I get the young man on his way. He can maybe sign somewhere else. And, I don't think there's like bad blood there, but it
right.
was
So
an
you
odd
think about,
thing,
okay, well, we could play hardball with this. Maybe you get a 6th-round pick, but is it worth a 6th-round pick to have some goodwill with the player and get under the cap now and have that flexibility? And in the end, maybe you don't know what you're going to get anyway. So might as well do it now and not worry about trying to squeeze every last draft pick out of, your roster that you can.
Yeah. And like a ton of people have been like, so Steelers made all these moves before everybody else. Are they going to trade for Justin Fields tomorrow? I don't think so, but maybe you're making space for something. You know what I mean?
And that's this week. Arthur Blank was talking about it. He was asked about the Atlanta Falcons owner. He was asking, okay, well, what's the plan at quarterback? And he said, we don't have a plan at quarterback, but we're about to go into meetings and really hammer this stuff out. So that's what's happening right now. The plan to set forward is really going to be in place through free agency, trade markets. And Adam Schefter today, I saw, said Mike Tomlin, big fan of Justin Fields. And we had talked about this for a while. Steelers Fields is a fit. And obviously, that's why, the folks that follow you were talking about this kind of a thing with Fields specifically because of the fit, because we've talked about this before, and because Adam Schefter today said that Mike Tomlin does like Justin Fields and that they will be adding a quarterback. So we'll see if that's a veteran quarterback through the draft, but Pickett, Rudolph, there's going to be some competition there.
Yeah, I was going to try to dance around that, but I just did a local podcast that I do on my own addressing the situation because Schefter, who I have great respect for, knew him a little bit at ESPN. We worked together. I mean, I think he's still the top at what he does. On the Pat McAfee show, said Tannehill could be in play for the Steelers. Russell Wilson could be in play. I don't see Russell Wilson being a fit at all. But his exact words, and this is when my ears, were on fire. He said, Mike Tomlin loves Justin Fields. And I was like, that's kind of all I need to know. I mean, I know who's the most important decision maker.
Told Adam Schefter, right? You're not going to put it that way unless the man told you that himself.
Or exactly. I mean, he loves Justin Fields. I immediately went, maybe I should pay a little more credence to these rumors because that's, unless it was the Rooney family loves Justin Fields, there's nothing more important than Mike Tomlin loving Justin Fields.
There we go. Some stuff really starting to heat up. Let's start with
But there's stuff going on in the league. It's kind of a fun time. People are going to get cut. There'll be some brand name dudes. Maybe someone gets signed. It started.
There have been times in my life when I enjoyed the offseason as much or more than the regular season in the NFL. And
I love it.
This year could be one of those as well. So much fun. Let's start with the San Francisco 49ers next. Then we'll get to the Kansas City Chiefs. How do these teams stay on top? How do the 49ers get to the pinnacle instead of finishing number 2 again? And it all starts this week. 2024 offseason is officially underway. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by DoorDash, and somehow, some way, the Kansas City Chiefs did pull it off. A lot of 49ers fans a little bit bummed about that they did not win the big game, but it was one heck of a delivery from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes to deliver that title back to Kansas City once again. And DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs. Restaurants, groceries, maybe 2 flowers and gifts. So the next time you're running low on dinner ideas, you're running low on pet supplies, or maybe you're just running low on time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered from DoorDash. Whatever watch party it is, and anything party you've got coming up, get it delivered with DoorDash. Football season may be over, but there's tons of basketball games. You got the big college basketball tournament coming up, and there's plenty of watch parties and plenty of food needed for that. And of course, summer barbecue is just right around the corner as well. So get dinner for tonight, groceries for the week, consolation prize for you and your sad 49ers friends, all on DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to DoorDash app to get everything you need delivered. San Francisco 49ers, they end up in second place here in the 2023 season. They have to pick themselves up, though, and start again. I was thinking of this, Matt, as it relates to my job and what it would be like for a team where you go through, OTAs and training camp, and you start from nothing, and you install plays and you build everything up, and you go through the whole season, and then you fall a little bit short. How difficult that must be in the weeks following a Super Bowl loss to get ready to start that again and just take that first step even. And if you're a player that's like teetering on retirement, could you just sit back and say, gosh, dang, am I ready to go through all of that again to get to that place? Because I think about us with the podcast. Like, hey, here you go. You've cultivated this podcast listenership. Season's over. Guess what? You get to start over. Zero. You got zero graphics. You got zero followers. You got to start a new feed. Let's go. And be like, I'm not doing that again, right? So
no one's ever heard of you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. And if you won, it's like, okay, it's a different thing. But if you are the team that got the closest and still lost, it's got to be hard to get up off the mat and start again. But the 49ers have to, and they have a lot of big decisions to make.
Along those lines, I think it's an interesting conversation too. It's because I've been told by a lot of different players, coaches, retired or not, that the hardest loss at the time is losing the AFC or NFC championship game. It's like, because you don't even get the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. You can sniff it, that's the hardest loss at the time. But I think, and again, this is just generating opinions of others. I think when you reflect back on your career, losing the Super Bowl hangs with you. Dan Marino, Jim Kelly. Like what could have been? I was there and I couldn't get it done,
Right. Chris Long talked about this on his podcast recently, and he did some ring chasing at the end of his career with the Patriots.
Yeah.
And he was part of the 28-3 Super Bowl with the Patriots won and came back against the Atlanta Falcons. And a veteran player on that team told him, obviously winning the Super Bowl is amazing. It's life-changing. It's career-changing. It's career-making in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And it's so great. And it's worth the opportunity to go try to get there and win it. But he said it is 1,000% better to be on a terrible 3-13 team than to lose the Super Bowl. There's nothing worse than losing the Super Bowl. And there's nothing better than winning it. And it could not be a bigger gap in between those two things.
I can understand it. I have heard some say that it's just a cool experience. I got to be there, and it was heartbreaking when it was done. But especially when you reflect back, like, man, I lost the Super. I never got one. That's brutal. So let's talk Niners. I want your opinions on this heavily, obviously. My general take on the Niners is let's not get crazy. I'm not suggesting they're trade up for Trey Lance again or anything like that. Let's not get crazy. Let's stay the course. Kind of think big picture as opposed to earth-shattering moves. And by that, I mean draft a project offensive tackle that might be Trent Williams' replacement or starts out at guard or right tackle, or maybe don't need him for week one. We're probably going to be a really good team, but, I want to get Ayuk extended before that gets to be a big problem, as opposed to going shopping outside the organization. And hey, the trade deadline could roll around again, and you go spend next year's first round pick on the best player available, but you should be in the hunt at that point. Start thinking contract with Purdy. I wouldn't rock the boat too much. And I'm not going to say that about every team.
Yeah, for the 49ers, and you go back 4 years ago when they lost to the Chiefs the last time in the Super Bowl, and it was very much run it back. We're going to same exact group, run it back. We're going to come back and win it again. And they even said no to Tom Brady. Said, no, Jimmy Garoppolo got us here. We're sticking with it. And, looking back is like, okay, you have to change something. You have to try to improve. You can't just run it back with the same group. But for the 49ers, all of the major players are already there. Now, Trent Williams collecting a big paycheck, $30 million cap hit this year. Deebo Samuel's got his first really big year of his newer contract. Eric Armstead's making a lot. Fred Warner, George Kittle, Charvarius Ward's making some cash. They signed Hargrave last offseason. They did a new deal with Bosa. It's still a little bit low for his base salary versus what it will become. He's going to end up, a couple of years making $42 million or 42 against the cap. So they can pull a lot of levers and change some of those cap hits. Those are just cap hits, not necessarily base salaries. But the core is in place. So not much of that is going to change unless there's some big trade coming in. Maybe it's a Debo and an Ayuk thing, as you mentioned. Ayuk is the big one because he's the next up. And I would imagine Brandon Ayuk doesn't show up to OTAs and training camp and does the holdout thing until he gets his new deal. And we've seen the 49ers have about one of those guys every single offseason. And, they can afford to pay a lot of guys because they have a cheap quarterback. If they didn't have some other 7th round picks, Matt, this is how cheap and how great of a deal it is to have a starting quarterback that's as good as Brock Purdy has played. that's as cheap as Brock Purdy is the last pick in the draft. He makes about $900,000, and it's such a low number that of your 53-man roster, only the top 51 guys on your roster actually count against the salary cap. Right. And if it wasn't for a couple of other 7th-round picks, Brock Purdy wouldn't not only would be cheap, he wouldn't count against the cap at all. Like, that's how cheap Brock Purdy
There's
is.
There's an outside chance next year with how the roster shakes out, he's not one of the top 51. There's a chance, which is bonkers.
It's pretty nuts.
His backup's going to make more than him, whoever that is, right?
And the rules are so that they can't even give him a new contract if they want to. So until after his third season next year, next offseason is where you start to talk about it. But he's going to be cheap for one more year. So they have a lot of flexibility, even though they have a ton of big cap hits. They can pull some levers and restructure some things. And my big question with the 49ers is, do they do maximum to bring in whatever they can this year, leverage future, leverage picks, maybe shorten their window to try to be as good as they can in 2024, which is the sort of the end of the best window for the 49ers, and then build around Purdy following that and try to extend that way? Or do they just play it straight and try to keep the window as open as long as they can? That's the big question, I think, for the 49ers in this one. And, there's Brandon Ayuk's girlfriend was on social media talking about, this might've been our last year in San Francisco. So we might see the whole wide receiver asked to be traded thing going on this offseason. It might be Brandon Ayuk this time. Maybe he wants to be a number one somewhere else. So I think that's going to be the drama for the 49ers. But in reality, it's probably going to be pretty close to the last time they lost the Super Bowl, where core's in place. They're going to try to run it back and fix a couple of pieces. And you nailed it. Every time I do a mock draft for the 49ers, Matt, it's going to be an offensive tackle at the end of the first round, maybe even trading up for one of those guys. And there's a lot of good ones. It's a good year for it. Yeah. It might be just on the outside of that top group of offensive tackles that you think are, starters right away in the NFL at pick 31. So they might have to get into the 20s to get one of those guys. But that'll be what I mock to them is a right tackle, someone that can start early. They need to upgrade over Colton McKivitz immediately, who could potentially even maybe, replace Trent Williams and be left tackle of the future at some point. So offensive tackle, clear need number one. Sneaky second need, though, looking at the 49ers free agents, is the guys they traded for this season to strengthen what's already a strength for them with the edge rushers is Randy Gregory and Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's a free agent as well.
He's also up there, right?
Future Steeler, Sam Darnold, maybe. Randy, it's going to be an ongoing joke until the Steelers get their quarterback this year. Every single quarterback is available. I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to bounce it off Matt. It's like, see if it sticks to the wall for Matt Williamson for a quarterback for the Steelers. Sam Darnold, think about it. Randy Gregory and Chase Young. And Chase Young played his best game in the Super Bowl for the 49ers. But if you have to try that hard to get a guy motivated, I don't know if they're going to do a big deal with Chase Young. So I think they might go back to the draft there potentially, as they've done so many times already, and get a defensive end. I think that's going to be a position of need. And don't look now, but there's another Bosa out there named Joey, Nick's big brother, might.
Yeah.
Because of cap reasons, I could see a 1-year prove-it deal for the brothers to play together in this window. What about a pair of Bosas on the edge for the 49ers? That's a dark horse.
I've thought about that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's not crazy. I mean, that would be good for the Chargers to get him off the books some way, shape, or form. He could even get cut tomorrow. I mean, I don't think that'll happen to such a big name player, but that's ideal to me. And so I started this conversation by saying, I want to keep the course. I don't want to rock the boat. And I did that on purpose because there is an argument for, we're only spending $1 million on our quarterback. We should rock the hell out of the boat right now. You know what I mean?
While we still can, and we'll figure out the rest later. And we're going to have to make a decision eventually between Debo and Ayuk. And to be honest with you, when they do that, so basically, if they do a new deal with Ayuk this offseason, they're saying we're not going to do another deal with Debo, and maybe you will trade Debo next year. But it's the way that they keep it all together this year. So that's the way I expect the 49ers to do this thing. And obviously they want to win. They're competitive, and you got some aging vets as well. I do think if I had to guess, if the 49ers lean heavy into, I don't care what the long-term implications are, we're going to be the best team we can in 2024 versus let's be smart, let's draft, let's continue to develop, keep this, try to have a 10-year window here. I think it's going to be the latter. I think they're going to go for it pretty hard and try to figure out where, just like last year, Javon Hargrave, I was surprised. They went to the top of they found the biggest free agent that was out there. And I didn't think the 49ers were going to find the cap space and be able to do it. And they did it. So they might do it again. And they might, like you said, next trade deadline, even add more there as they have the last couple of seasons. So Niners I have a feeling they're a competitive group. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they're not going to sit back. They're going to try to be the best team they possibly can. So they might have some tricks up their sleeves with the trade market and even the free agent market this offseason, surprisingly, with their cap space.
The last nugget I have on exactly what you just said there is right now they're tight up against it, but it sounds like they can make space if they so choose. I mean, they could borrow from the bank of Bosa and stuff like that.
Right? Warner and Kittle and all these guys. And they've already done some of those, and I'm sure they'll do a lot more restructuring to get the space they need to operate.
Okay. Be interesting.
Next, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're on top. How do they stay on top? In particular, two massive free agent decisions to be made. And I think one clear addition that needs to be made to the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's time to get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. Yeah, I know the NFL season is over, but guess what? The NBA season is jamming, and it's about to be playoff time in the NBA. Of course, some college hoops that are always fun to get in on that action at FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 extra bucks to play with at FanDuel if that first bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props. And look, the NFL season is over, but man, maybe my favorite way and the most fun I have every season betting on NFL is those draft props. And there's more and more tasty draft props popping up at FanDuel all the time leading up to April as well. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Kansas City Chiefs. Congratulations to them. They're a great team. You got a superstar quarterback, the best in the game, and you are really well coached, not only with your head coach and your offensive play caller and Andy Reid, but your defensive coordinator and Steve Spagnuolo. They're going to be good. They're going to be good for a long time, Matt, but I think they could be even better. And where I think they can be better is on the offensive side of the ball. But they have two really key defensive free agents coming up. A guy that's become a shutdown corner for them, L'Jarius Sneed. Speaking of cheap players, $982,000 salary in 2023. That's going to go up exponentially as a free agent for L'Jarius Sneed at the age of 27. He played 91.1% of the snaps for the Chiefs last year. I'm looking at their free agent list as of snap percentage. And then the next two on the list is Mike Dana, the defensive lineman, and Chris Jones, who's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. They found a way to bring him back on his, $20+ million deal, a 1-year deal. But I don't know if they can bring them both back. If you had to choose between Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed, who do you keep for the Chiefs?
That's a tough one for sure. So I thought for sure one of the two was at least going to hit the market. I mean, you could re-franchise Jones, but that's not usually the way things work. You could franchise Sneed because he's probably in line to make somewhere between like 18 and 20 million a year as one of the most coveted corners on the open market. And maybe you just buy 1 year doing that. And so I was looking at the cap situation for the Chiefs, and right now they have like 35 million, which is nice, but they owe Mahomes a $35 million bonus here coming up in a couple weeks or whatever. But what they can do is they can restructure that and make it like a $1 million bonus. I mean, they can move that money around and all of a sudden like double their cap space, end up with like 65 million.
And it's amazing.
So maybe you get both,
We don't have time to go through it, and I'm not good enough to take you through it. But if you want to look up the Patrick Mahomes contract, and it's already been restructured, I think, multiple times since he signed that 10-year, $500 million contract. And it turns out to be one of the friendliest contracts in the NFL, just because of what you have in the player And even though it's a big money contract, there's so many different levers set up to pull in this contract and
Pretty cool.
restructures in a way that it's going to help the team a lot. So it's pretty team friendly, even though it is a huge contract and he's making a whole bunch of money. And you can go find more details about that contract and what is to be expected throughout the lifespan of that contract with all the restructures. But it does allow the Chiefs to do maybe some things that it doesn't look like going into the new league year with where their cap is that they might not be able to do. And then, of course, when you sign a new player like Brandon Ayuk or Chris Jones, their first year cap hit is going to be lower.
It's not bad, right?
Yeah, so
you get a huge signing bonus, right?
Early, and then you just have to figure out things later. And when you're a good team, that's what they tend to do quite often.
So I've been paying a lot of attention to this because I'd love Sneed to be a Steeler. I don't think he will be. But I think in the end, Kansas City will keep both. You asked me if I had to pick. Sneed's younger, but I still would take Jones. He's too special to me. I mean, I think that's a Hall of Fame type guy, a defensive MVP type guy. And it's a bad defensive tackle class. It's a much better corner class. And they've had great success drafting and developing defensive backs too.
That's what I was going to say. Do they lean into that and say, well, maybe we can just keep drafting and developing these corners? Because they did it with Charvarius Ward, let him walk. Darius Sneed walks in. He's as good or better than Ward was. And do they just try to keep doing that because they've been so good at it? And they did it again with McDuffie as well. He's more of a slot type nickel player, but it's
their
phenomenal.
Safeties as well. And
right.
Yeah, they've done a great job drafting and developing all through their defense, to be honest with you. And I always go back to the Tyreek Hill trade. The Tyreek Hill trade turned into young draft picks on defense. And then they won the Super Bowl this year based on defense and Mahomes. But I know where you're going to start the show is they need another receiver. And Kelsey's not going to last forever. I wouldn't balk at another offensive tackle too. I mean, those tackles this year were heavily penalized, and one's way overpriced, and the other guy's Smith's never been good enough. I think they led the league in drops. If you're gonna keep Kelsey on a pitch count for during the regular season for one more year, who's gonna carry the load in terms of receptions? So I think you definitely need to add a first round pass catcher or Mike Evans. I always think of Mike Evans there.
I've been putting Mike Evans there for a while. We were talking about that at the trade deadline. I think is why that seed was planted in my head. But how awesome would it be for Patrick Mahomes to have another one of those guys? But he's also proven he doesn't need it either. So maybe they lean into the draft again, and you hope that that Rashee Rice takes another step and you draft another maybe dynamic sort of down the field type of receiver and hope you can develop that with Patrick Mahomes and keep that position group a little bit less expensive and try to figure out things to tackle. Donovan Smith is a free agent at tackle as well. I forgot to mention Willie Gay, linebacker, to go with Dana and Derek Nottie. And there's a lot of defensive
quality players
on this team. And if I had to guess, I would say they go expensive on defense, cheaper on offense. So maybe we shouldn't expect the superstar wide receiver to end up with Patrick Mahomes there. But I do think there's a chance they have a better offense next year than they had this year. So this was the best shot for one of those teams to knock off the Chiefs, and still nobody could do it.
100%. So to tease tomorrow's show, I did my first ever mock draft, and I had a receiver going 32. To those guys with the thoughts of they could probably finagle a way to keep Sneed and Jones. They'll lose the Danas and Gays and those guys, but they have some depth there, and they'll develop those dudes. Last note I have is you mentioned Chris Long, and coincidentally, I wanted to bring this up too. Is I'm sure it's happened to some degree, but it happened with the Patriots in the Chris Long era where, hey, if I'm a 32-year-old dude, I'm taking 70 cents on the dollar to play for Kansas City.
Lean into that. That extra little value you get from some ring chasers that want to come play for a little bit less than they might have gotten somewhere else at the end of their career that can really give you some high-level veteran presence, veteran snaps on a Super Bowl ready roster. Yeah, I could see that.
Keep him on a pitch count, maybe bring him in as a designated pass rusher. They play 50% of the snaps, something like that, or their receiver that you rotate in and out or something like that. Save it for the playoffs and let's go strong and win another ring,
One thing the Chiefs do need to be wary of is the broken down older player, though. They've had too many injuries. They need some healthy guys. So maybe that's another reason to lean into the youth rather than some of the veterans out there.
Yeah. I'm glad you did mention the draft and develop, though. I mean, that GM and position coaches are doing a tremendous job with that team, and people don't talk about that enough. Everyone just talks about Reed and Mahomes and Kelsey and Spags, rightfully so. But their defensive back coach, whoever he is doing a bang-up job. And, bringing along guys like Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey. I mean, like, they've developed players well.
Brett Veach, GM. I mean, he spearheaded the Mahomes thing. He gets a ton of credit for all this as well. And you're right, we don't bring him up enough at all for what he's done with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's got a big offseason ahead for him here. But he's got
one more thing, because one of the things that's a little different about this team all of a sudden is instead of everyone stealing all your coaches, they're going to start coming back. Like, is Bieniemy just going to come on back? Spags isn't leaving.
Nagy already came back.
Nagy, right. The Niners have lost coaches left and right. I mean, where the Chiefs, like, maybe they left for a year or so. Come on back. The way it works.
Fascinating stuff. And yeah, it looks like Bieniemy's coming back to the Chiefs again. There's
a lot of continuity on that team.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. There you go. Chiefs and 49ers. Can they get back to the Super Bowl again next year? Can the 49ers get over the hump? They're no doubt in meetings to try to figure out how to do exactly that, as are all 32 teams in the NFL. And we're going to cover all 32 teams in the NFL as we go through this offseason, because we are here for you every day, your team every day. That's what the Locked On Podcast Network is all about. And tomorrow, we're going to push back, by the way, programming note, we're going to push back our mailbag this week from Wednesday to Thursday. So you can still get those questions in at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments as well, and we will get to your mailbag questions Thursday. But Wednesday, it's the off season. So what season is it? It's draft season. It's time for Matt Williamson's first mock draft. That's coming up tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.